Picture this. You wake up to the grinding roar of concrete mixers destroying a creek that's flowed behind your home since before the Civil War. The smell of diesel exhaust mixing with crushed limestone fills your nostrils as you watch $80,000 of your homeowner fees get poured into what used to be a crystal-clear mountain stream. It's for flood control, HOA President Brenda Hartwell smugly announces from her white Tesla. What this real estate agent didn't know: I'm a retired Army Corps hydrologist, and she just created a ticking time bomb. Fast forward 6 months. Brenda's $1 million home sits in 2 feet of swamp water, foundation cracking, while my shabby property stays bone dry. The FBI is knocking on her door, and that concrete channel she was so proud of, it's about to cost her everything. My name's Dale Brennan, 58 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought the biggest threat to my sanity was finding carburetor parts for a 1972 Harley Sportster. Turns out the real threat was an HOA board president who confused a real estate license with a PhD in hydroengineering. I inherited my grandfather's 2-acre slice of paradise in what used to be rural Colorado. My grandfather William Brennan was a combat engineer who survived Normandy and came home to build something beautiful. This creek was his therapy. Every morning for 3 years since retiring from the Army Corps of Engineers, I'd follow the same ritual. Coffee on the back porch, listening to Cottonwood Creek babble over smooth granite stones. The scent of motor oil from my workshop mixed with wet willow bark. My boots crunching on gravel paths grandfather laid by hand in 1948. What made our property special wasn't the 1950s ranch house or my cluttered workshop full of vintage motorcycle parts. It was 400 yards of creek with water rights dating to 1873. Older than Colorado statehood, and definitely older than suburban princesses with attitude problems. Then came Willowbrook Estates, sprouting around us like expensive mushrooms after rain. 47 homes, average price $900,000. Mostly California refugees fleeing their own HOA disasters. Enter our villain, Brenda Hartwell, 52, HOA board president and self-appointed empress of suburban perfection. White Tesla vanity plates reading "sold for you," and pearl earrings she wore like battle armor. Their $1.2 million colonial backs right up to my creek. The first shot came on a Tuesday morning. Official HOA violation notice, certified mail. Unsightly storage of automotive parts visible from neighboring properties violates community aesthetic standards. Fine, $200 per day until compliance achieved. Here's what Brenda's expensive lawyers missed. My property predates their HOA by 80 years. Grandfather's deed included mineral rights, water rights, and a grandfathered exemption from future development restrictions. The face-to-face meeting went exactly as you'd expect. Brenda's office reeked of vanilla candles and entitlement. She suggested I might be happier somewhere with more flexible property standards. Translation: somewhere poor people belong. I responded with a certified letter explaining that HOA covenants don't apply to grandfathered properties. Her retaliation was swift: anonymous complaints to the county about illegal business operations. But that was just Brenda testing the waters. The real insanity started when she discovered water rights. In Colorado, water means power. And in Brenda's world, people like me with calloused hands and grandfathered property don't deserve either. Spring snowmelt was running heavy that year. She'd done her homework this time, hired a Denver law firm that specialized in environmental property disputes. Their strategy was elegant in its ruthlessness: file a nuisance water flow complaint claiming my property created dangerous runoff. They wanted to force me into a $50,000 environmental impact study. Here's something I learned during 30 years with the Army Corps. Lawyers love complicated environmental regulations because they assume regular people won't understand them. What they forget is that some of us actually design the systems they're trying to regulate. I called my old colleague Pete Morrison at the Colorado Water Authority. Took him exactly 10 minutes to spot what they'd missed. They'd based their entire complaint on watershed maps from 1967. Before the interstate was built, before modern storm drainage changed every flow pattern in the valley. The modern geological data told a completely different story. Far from causing problems, my section of creek actually prevented flooding by creating natural retention during spring runoff. Those granite boulders grandfather positioned, they weren't decorative. The old combat engineer had built a flood control system before most people knew what the term meant. But Brenda wasn't interested in facts. She called an emergency HOA meeting while Martha and I were visiting our daughter in Portland. The agenda item looked innocent: emergency flood mitigation assessment. What actually happened was Brenda presenting doctored photographs showing severe erosion damage, claiming immediate concrete channeling was needed to prevent catastrophic property damage. Special assessment, $1,800 per homeowner. Total project cost, $127,000. I cut our vacation short and drove home through the night. The sound hit me first: jackhammers and diesel engines where morning bird songs used to live. Then the smell: concrete dust mixing with destroyed vegetation. My creek was gone. In its place, an ugly concrete trough that looked like a prison drainage ditch. They'd buried grandfather's carefully positioned boulders under tons of concrete, destroying fish spawning areas that had existed since before Colorado was a state. Martha stood beside me, tears streaming. They killed it. They actually killed a living creek. But here's the thing about being a hydrologist: you learn to think like water. And water always finds the truth eventually. I spent the next week documenting everything. More importantly, I researched Pinnacle Construction, the company that had done the work. Turns out they had quite the track record: 3 EPA violations in 5 years, $75,000 in fines for unauthorized waterway modifications. Any significant modification to a natural waterway requires approval from the county, the state environmental agency, and often the EPA. Brenda's crew had skipped all 3. The Clean Water Act doesn't mess around. Violators faced $25,000 per day in fines federal level. Colorado's EPA could add another $10,000 daily. Every day that concrete stayed in place was another $35,000 in potential fines. I filed complaints with every agency that had jurisdiction. Within 10 days, I had 3 separate government agencies investigating and an environmental law clinic from the University of Colorado offering free legal representation. Sarah Olivia, a third-year environmental law student, had taken my case as her senior thesis project. She discovered something interesting while digging through HOA financial records: a pattern of inflated contracts. Mr. Brennan, this concrete project cost $127,000 for work that should have been $40,000 maximum. The excess went to consulting fees that all traced back to companies owned by Brenda's business associates. The girl had found smoking guns. Board meetings held in secret. Contracts approved without competitive bidding. Special assessments used to fund personal vendettas. What started as environmental destruction was looking more like organized fraud. But the real revelation came from grandfather's engineering notebooks. I'd found his 1973 consulting report for the county, a document that predicted exactly what was happening now. He'd warned against concrete channeling in this specific location, calculating that it would increase downstream flooding risk by 300% during spring runoff. That's when I realized the beautiful irony. Brenda thought she was solving a flooding problem, but she'd actually created a hydraulic time bomb. The natural creek had meandered through my property, distributing flow across a wide floodplain that absorbed excess water like a sponge. The concrete channel eliminated that natural absorption, creating a high-pressure water cannon aimed directly at million-dollar basements. My property, being upstream and naturally elevated, would stay bone dry. The HOA homes sitting downstream from the concrete channel were going to flood like submarines with screen doors. The community organizing had taken on a life of its own. Weekly meetings in my workshop drew 30 or 40 people. Martha handled the social media campaign. #SaveCottonwood Creek had over 5,000 followers. Dr. Angela Rodriguez from Colorado State's Environmental Engineering Department volunteered as our expert witness. She'd reviewed grandfather's 1973 predictions and confirmed them with modern computer modeling. The concrete channel would increase flood risk by 400% during heavy spring runoff, directing all that water straight toward the HOA homes' foundations. Weather Service predictions were confirming our worst-case scenarios. Heavy snowpack in the Rockies, warmer than normal spring temperatures. The concrete channel was going to face its first real test, and it was going to fail spectacularly. The federal courthouse in Denver was packed when the trial began. Judge Martha Blackwood presided over what local media had dubbed the Creek War Trial. Environmental groups filled half the gallery. Veterans organizations claimed another section. Kate Morrison's opening statement was surgical. "Your Honor, this case represents the systematic destruction of a century-old ecosystem to satisfy one woman's personal vendetta. The defendant didn't just violate environmental law, she embezzled nearly $200,000 from her own community to fund this destruction. Then Kate played the recordings. Brenda's voice filled the room, offering bribes, threatening Martha's career. The secret HOA meeting recording revealed her true motivations, driving out incompatible residents to boost property values. My testimony was straightforward. 30 years of flood control experience explained in terms anyone could understand. I showed the judge grandfather's engineering report. Computer animations demonstrated how the channel directed 400% more water toward the HOA homes. But the real drama came when Dr. Rodriguez presented real-time flood monitoring data. Your Honor, creek flow is approaching record levels right now. This concrete installation has created an imminent threat to public safety. The judge called a recess when the National Weather Service issued a flash flood emergency for our area. When we reconvened, Brenda looked like she'd seen her own ghost. That's when Kate delivered the mic drop moment. Your Honor, while we've been in session this morning, the defendant's concrete channel has begun flooding the very homes it was supposed to protect. Live television coverage confirmed the beautiful irony. Water was backing up behind Brenda's concrete bottleneck. $1-million homes sat in lakes of muddy water while my shabby workshop stayed bone dry on higher ground. Brenda's meltdown was captured by every camera. She accused me of orchestrating the flood, claimed environmental groups had weaponized the weather. Judge Blackwood's patience evaporated. Miss Hartwell, you will control yourself or be held in contempt. FBI agents served additional warrants during lunch break. EPA enforcement officers secured the concrete work site as a crime scene. The afternoon ruling was comprehensive. Judge Blackwood ruled in my favor on every count. She ordered immediate removal of all concrete, complete creek restoration, and damages totaling $750,000. 6 months later, you wouldn't recognize Cottonwood Creek. Where ugly concrete once imprisoned flowing water, a natural channel now winds through restored banks lined with native willows and wildflowers. The restoration became a community effort that would have made grandfather proud. Local contractors donated equipment. High school students planted native vegetation. Even guilt-ridden former HOA members showed up with shovels. The broader impact rippled outward. Colorado's legislature passed what environmental groups nicknamed Dale's Law. Legislation strengthening property rights against HOA overreach and requiring environmental impact studies before any modifications to natural waterways. The financial justice was thorough. That $750 judgment funded the complete restoration, paid all legal fees, and left enough surplus to establish the William Brennan Environmental Engineering Scholarship at Colorado State. Brenda pleaded guilty to federal fraud charges and received 18 months in prison, followed by 3 years probation and complete restitution. Her real estate license was permanently revoked, her assets seized, and her family relocated to Florida. But the real transformation was deeper. Willowbrook evolved from a gated community of suspicious strangers into an actual neighborhood where people knew each other's names and worked together. My workshop has returned to its original purpose, restoring vintage motorcycles and teaching neighborhood kids about engines, water flow, and the importance of standing up to bullies. Last week, I got a phone call from a homeowner in Arizona facing nearly identical creek destruction by her HOA. As I listened to her story, I realized this fight was bigger than one creek in Colorado. But for now, it's enough to sit on the back porch at sunset, listening to grandfather's creek sing its ancient song. Home isn't just where your house sits, it's where your values are protected and your community thrives. If you've got an HOA nightmare story brewing, drop it in the comments. You might be surprised how many legal options you have when petty tyrants try to destroy something beautiful.